On August 22, 1485, a king's crown wasn't placed on his head in a grand cathedral. It was found tangled in a hawthorn bush on a bloody battlefield. That single, almost unbelievable moment didn't just end one of England's most brutal wars, it kicked off a brand new dynasty. But that's just one of the shocking true stories that make August 2020 a date that has secretly shaped our world. From that battlefield discovery to a revolution that would shatter an empire, today we're uncovering the most surprising historical moments of August 2020. For over 30 years, the great houses of Lancaster and York had torn England apart in a bloody struggle we now call the Wars of the Roses. On August 2020, 1485, it all came to a head on a field in Leicestershire. On one side stood King Richard III, the Yorkist king, a controversial figure who'd taken the throne from his own young nephew just 2 years earlier. On the other was Henry Tudor, a Welsh nobleman with a shaky claim to the throne who'd spent most of his life in exile. By most estimates, Richard's army was the larger force, with some historians putting his numbers around 12, 0 men to Henry's 5, 0 to 8, 0. The king also held the high ground on Ambion Hill, looking down on his challenger. But Richard had a huge problem: loyalty. A third army, about 6-0 men strong, commanded by the Stanley family, was just standing there, uncommitted to either side. Now, Lord Stanley was Henry Tudor's stepfather, but Richard III was holding Stanley's son hostage to ensure he stayed neutral. The fate of England rested on their decision. As the battle raged, Richard saw his chance. He spotted Henry Tudor's banner across the field, protected by just a small group of bodyguards. In a moment of pure medieval bravado, Richard decided he was going to end the war himself. He gathered his personal knights and led a thunderous cavalry charge straight at his rival. For a second, it looked like it would work. Richard, a famed warrior, knocked down a giant of a man, Sir John Chain, and got within a sword's length of Henry Tudor himself. But then, the Stanleys made their move. Sir William Stanley wheeled his forces around and slammed into the side of Richard's charge, saving Henry from certain death. The king's desperate gamble had failed. Surrounded, his horse stuck in the marshy ground, Richard III, the last Plantagenet king, was overwhelmed and killed. He was the last English monarch to die in battle. After the fighting stopped, the story goes that Richard's crown was found and presented to Henry Tudor. He was crowned King Henry VII right there on the battlefield, kicking off the Tudor dynasty that would rule for over a century and change England forever. It's a pivotal moment where a kingdom was lost and won in a single, desperate charge, and a new era began with a crown supposedly plucked from a bush. While August 2020 saw one war end in England, centuries later, it marked the explosive beginning of another, a revolution that would terrify the colonial powers of the world. On the night of August 2020, 1791, the French colony of Saint-Domingue, the most profitable colony on the planet, erupted in flames. And this wasn't a war between kings. This was the start of the Haitian Revolution, the largest and only truly successful slave rebellion in human history. Saint-Domingue, which we now know as Haiti, was the jewel of the French Empire, making obscene amounts of money from its sugar and coffee plantations. But that wealth was built on a foundation of unimaginable cruelty. Hundreds of thousands of enslaved Africans were forced into labor so brutal and conditions so horrific that French planters found it cheaper to work them to death and just import more people. The French Revolution in Europe, with all its talk of liberty and equality, had made the colony a powder keg. White planters, free people of color, and the massive enslaved population all had their own dreams and grievances. The fuse was lit on the night of August 14th, when a Vodou priest named Dutty Boukman held a secret ceremony, sealing a pact for a mass uprising. 1 week later, On the night of the 20th, the plan was unleashed. Thousands of enslaved people across the colony's northern plains rose up in a coordinated attack. Plantations were burned to the ground, their owners were killed, and the rebels armed themselves with anything they could find. Within weeks, the uprising had become an army of nearly 80 people, and a third of the island was theirs. The planters, who had lived with absolute power, were now trapped in the cities, watching the source of their wealth turn to ash. This wasn't some brief, chaotic riot. It was the start of a brutal, 13-year fight for freedom. The rebellion was led by brilliant military minds like Toussaint Louverture, who would eventually command the Revolutionary Army. They fought and defeated the French, the Spanish, and the British, the superpowers of Europe. In 1804, they declared independence, establishing the Republic of Haiti, the first nation founded by former slaves. The Haitian Revolution sent shockwaves across the globe, becoming a nightmare for slave-owning societies and a powerful symbol of hope for the oppressed. August 20th was the day the first spark was lit. It's incredible how a single day can echo through time, shaping our world in ways we rarely think about. If you're finding these hidden histories as fascinating as I do, take a second to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We dive into stories just like this every week, uncovering the past to make sense of the present. Not all of the huge events of August 20th were born from violence. In fact, one was a direct response to it, a revolutionary attempt to force a little humanity into the inhumanity of war. On August 20th, 1864, 12 nations met in Geneva, Switzerland, to sign a document that would change the world, the First Geneva Convention. The whole idea was championed by a Swiss businessman named Jean-Henri Dunant. 5 years earlier, Dunant had been traveling in Italy and stumbled upon the horrific aftermath of the Battle of Solferino. He was appalled. Nearly 40 soldiers were left dead or wounded on the field with almost no medical care. The suffering was immense. Moved by the horror, Dunant organized local villagers to help, begging them to care for the wounded, no matter what uniform they wore. Famously coining the phrase, "Tutti fratelli," all our brothers. When he got home, he wrote a book about it called A Memory of Solferino, where he asked a radical question: couldn't we create neutral relief groups in peacetime, ready to care for the wounded in war? The idea caught fire across Europe. It led directly to the founding of the International Committee of the Red Cross in 1863. A year later, the Swiss government hosted that fateful conference. The convention they signed on August 20th was groundbreaking. It declared that sick and wounded soldiers had to be cared for, regardless of their side. It established that medical staff, hospitals, and ambulances were to be considered neutral and protected from attack. And to identify them, they created a universal symbol, a red cross on a white background, the reverse of the Swiss flag, to honor Dunant's homeland. The First Geneva Convention was a radical statement that even in the middle of a war, some shred of our shared humanity has to remain. It laid the foundation for all modern laws of war, cementing the idea that there are lines even armies cannot cross. While some were drawing lines to create rules for war, others were drawing lines on maps to claim entire continents. On August 20th, 1770, the British explorer Lieutenant James Cook sailed the HMS Endeavour to a small island off the northern coast of Australia. After navigating the treacherous Great Barrier Reef, he climbed a hill on what he decided to name Possession Island. From there, he looked out over the vast land he'd been charting for months. He performed a short ceremony, raised the British flag, and claimed the entire eastern coast of the continent for King George III, naming it New South Wales. In his journal, Cook noted that he had taken possession of the whole eastern coast. It was a quiet, almost casual act on a remote island, but its consequences were enormous. Cook's claim is what paved the way for British colonization just 18 years later. Ironically, Cook himself didn't seem too impressed with the place, writing in his journal that it didn't look like it produced anything valuable enough to encourage Europeans to settle there. History, of course, would prove him very, very wrong. But that's not the whole story. The traditional owners of the island, the Kororeg people, have oral histories that say Cook never even set foot on the shore. They say their warriors were waiting for him and that no ceremony ever took place. Whether the flag was actually raised or not, the entry in Cook's journal became the official justification for a claim that would dispossess a continent's indigenous peoples and forever change the destiny of Australia. A single day can see dynasties rise, but it can also be the day a nation's hero falls, changing its future in a heartbeat. On August 22, 1922, in a remote winding country lane in County Cork, Irish revolutionary leader Michael Collins was killed in an ambush. Collins was a giant of the Irish struggle for independence. He was the mastermind who ran a brilliant and ruthless guerrilla war against British forces. His spy networks had brought the world's most powerful empire to the negotiating table. He was one of the key architects of the 1921 Anglo-Irish Treaty, which created the Irish Free State. But that very treaty, his life's crowning achievement, is what got him killed. The agreement partitioned Ireland, leaving 6 counties in the north under British rule, and required Irish leaders to swear an oath of allegiance to the British monarch. For many hardline Republicans, this was a betrayal. The treaty split the independence movement in two, plunging Ireland into a bitter and tragic civil war. Collins, now commander-in-chief of the new Free State Army, found himself fighting his former friends. Against all advice, he traveled to his home county of Cork, a hotbed of anti-treaty feeling, hoping he could negotiate peace. He famously said, "They won't shoot me in my own county." On the evening of August 2020, his convoy was driving through a valley known as Bayal Nam Bluff. An anti-treaty ambush party opened fire. Instead of speeding away, Collins ordered his men to stop and fight back. In the short, fierce gun battle that followed, Michael Collins, the big fella, was hit in the head by a single bullet and killed instantly. He was the only one who died. His death, at just 31 years old, was a devastating blow to the young Irish state, robbing it of its most dynamic leader when he was needed most. One day, August 2020. The day a medieval king gambled everything and lost his life. The day enslaved people lit a fire of rebellion that built a nation. The day the world tried to write rules for compassion in the middle of war. The day a line on a map claimed a continent. And the day a revolutionary hero was struck down by his own countrymen. Each of these moments is pivotal on its own, but together, they show that history isn't a straight line. It's a dense, overlapping tapestry of ambition, rebellion, tragedy, and hope. A single date can hold the secret stories that made our world what it is today. What are your thoughts on these events? Are there any other surprising August 2020 moments that we missed? Let us know down in the comments. And for more journeys into the most incredible stories from history, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Thanks for watching.